The first time I saw the old cabin, it looked like it had been asleep for a century. Moss crept over its shingles, ivy twisted around the porch rails, and a lonely for sale sign hung crooked in the gravel drive. Something about it called to me. I'd spent years flipping houses. This one, a 150-year-old frontier estate buried deep in Pine Hollow, felt personal. The air itself hummed with memory, the kind that whispers your name when the wind moves through rotting beams. I didn't know it yet, but that whisper would soon turn into screams. When I signed the deed, the realtor chuckled nervously. "You sure you want to deal with the HOA here?" "There?" Passionate. Thought he meant fussy old folks who cared too much about paint colors. I'd dealt with worse. But the second I parked my truck in front of the cabin, a woman marched up the gravel in a cloud of floral perfume and indignation. "You can't park there," she barked. "That driveway belongs to the community." I looked down at the paper in my hand. "Ma'am, it's on my property line." She crossed her arms. "Property line. This estate is our heritage. My family settled this land. That's my son's inheritance you're standing on." I almost laughed. "Then your son should have bought it when it went on the market." Her eyes sharpened like glass. "We'll see about that." That was my first encounter with Karen, president of the Pine Hollow HOA. Self-appointed guardian of tradition, and soon, the woman who would make my life a storm of noise complaints, petty fines, and midnight threats. The cabin creaked when I stepped inside, dust motes floating in golden slants of light. Every board groaned, like it remembered footsteps from another century. The fireplace was filled with cold ash, but above it hung a brass plaque that read Elias Branford. 1875. I didn't know the name, but something about it felt important. Renovation became my obsession. Days blurred into nights as I stripped wallpaper, replaced beams, and sanded floors until my hands bled. Each swing of the hammer felt like breathing life into a ghost. But every time progress showed, Karen appeared, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning for reasons to destroy it. "You're altering a historical landmark," she snapped one morning while I was repainting the porch. "You need board approval. It's private property," I said. "Not when it affects community value." Her voice echoed down the lane, summoning two other HOA loyalists who stood behind her like bodyguards. I could have argued. But instead I smiled and waved to the security camera mounted under my EV, one of several I'd quietly installed after finding my tools scattered in tire tracks across my lawn. That night, I watched the footage. At 2 a.m., headlights flashed, then shut off. 3 shadows crept across my yard. One pried open my gate. Another poured something along my porch steps. Faint glint of metal caught the light. Nails. They dumped nails across my walkway. The next morning, Karen strolled by, coffee in hand, humming. I swept the nails into a bucket and called out, "You dropped something." She froze for half a second, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. Over the next weeks, the harassment escalated. Fines for unauthorized roofing, complaints about noise violations when I wasn't home, letters claiming I was trespassing on communal woodland behind my lot. Still, I kept working. The cabin began to shine again. Restored stone chimney, oil-finished floors, handcrafted window panes catching sunlight like old glass should. But restoration isn't just about wood and nails. It's about history. In the attic, behind a warped panel, I found a tin box. Inside lay a stack of letters, bound with faded twine. Each was signed Elias Branford. He'd written to a woman named Margaret about a feud over land rights. "They say the hollow belongs to the Branch family," one letter read. "But my claim is older. I will prove it, even if it means war." Karen's maiden name, I'd later learn. My cabin wasn't just a house to her. It was the last symbol of a grudge older than either of us. The next HOA meeting was my invitation to battle. I showed up in clean jeans, calm smile. Karen sat at the head of the folding table, flanked by her cronies. "Mr. Turner," she said sweetly, "your restoration is violating Section 14B, exterior modifications to historically significant structures." "I'm not violating anything," I replied, sliding a folder across the table. Inside were copies of the Branford letters. "But your family might be." Her face drained of color. Where did you get those? From the attic on my property. It seems your ancestors tried to steal this land from Elias Branford, and now you're trying to do the same. A murmur rippled through the room. She stood abruptly. This meeting is over, but it wasn't. That night, my cameras caught them again, Karen and her son both sneaking around with flashlights. They pried at my fence, whispered, pointed toward the cabin. I saved the footage, backed it up to the cloud, and waited. Days later, I woke to find private property spray-painted across my door in red. My tires slashed. The air smelled like gasoline. That was the breaking point. I installed floodlights, motion alarms, hidden cameras in the trees. Then I called a friend in the county assessor's office. 2 days later, he sent me certified copies of every land transfer since. 1,875. The cabin had passed through several hands, none of them the Branch family. Karen's claim was a lie, so I invited her to see the finished restoration. When she arrived, she looked around in stunned silence. The porch gleamed, the stone path lined with lanterns. Beautiful, isn't it? I said. A 150-year-old home, finally at peace. Her jaw trembled. You had no right. This was supposed to be ours. No, Karen, I said quietly. It never was. Then I played the footage on my phone, her and her son trespassing, vandalizing, threatening. Her face twisted as realization hit. Delete that, she screamed. Not a chance, I said. But I'll make you a deal. You stay off my land and I won't press charges. She backed away, muttering something about curses and betrayal, then stormed off into the night. I thought it was over. But a week later, someone set fire to the old tool shed behind my cabin. Flames roared up the hillside before I could even grab the hose. The fire department said it was arson. My cameras, they'd been disabled. That's when I knew Karen wasn't done. She wanted this land destroyed before I could keep it. So I rebuilt again, stronger. Steel-reinforced locks. Cameras hidden where she'd never think to look. And as I restored the last beam of the old cabin, found one final letter tucked behind it, Elias Branford's final words. To whoever restores this home, know that its peace is earned, not given. Guard it well. I looked out the window toward the dark line of the HOA's cul-de-sac. I wasn't leaving. Not now, not ever. Because this wasn't just my home anymore. It was my proof that some things can't be bullied away, not by time, not by fire. Definitely not by a woman who thought the world owed her son everything. If you've ever faced someone who tried to take what's yours, remember this. The best revenge is restoration. Bring back what they tried to ruin. Make it stronger. Make it shine. And when they come screaming that it's their inheritance, just hit play on the footage and let the truth burn brighter than their lies. The following morning broke with a thin fog that hung low over Pine Hollow, wrapping the trees in pale mist and quiet. I walked out onto the porch with my coffee, scanning the tree line. The sense of being watched hadn't faded overnight. If anything, it had thickened, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. My cameras blinked steady green lights, all online again. I'd installed a few new ones, tiny pinhole lenses disguised in birdhouses and fence posts. I wasn't taking chances anymore. Karen's war had turned from harassment into sabotage, and I wanted proof of every second. I spent the morning going over footage, organizing files, labeling clips, but around 11 a.m., a white SUV rolled slowly down the gravel lane and stopped right outside my gate. The tinted window rolled down, and there she was, Karen, with that same smug smile, like she owned the air itself. Morning, she said sweetly. You'll be happy to know the HOA voted last night. You're officially in violation of 6 community standards. I leaned on the porch railing.com, letting her talk. Noise ordinance. Exterior color known compliance. Unauthorized fencing. You'll receive written notice. I sipped my coffee. You must be proud. Her eyes flicked toward the cabin. It's still not yours, you know. My great-grandfather built that foundation. Your great-grandfather built lies, I replied, and I've got the letters to prove it. The smile cracked just slightly before she rolled up her window and drove away. I watched the SUV vanish into the fog, the sound of its tires crunching gravel fading like an echo of arrogance. That afternoon, I met with the county sheriff. Officer Briggs had seen enough HOA nonsense to last a lifetime. But when I showed him the videos, the trespassing, the vandalism, the nails, even the faint outline of her son's face in the dark, he frowned. "This is harassment," he said, "and possibly criminal damage. But you sure you want to go this route? Filing charges will light a fuse." I looked him dead in the eye. "The fuse is already burning," he sighed, filled out the report, and promised to keep patrols nearby. I left the office with the first sense of control I'd felt in months. Yet deep down, I knew Karen wasn't the kind of person to stop because of paperwork. She thrived on control, and I'd just ripped it out of her hands. 2 nights later, I found proof. Around 1:43 a.m., one of my new cameras picked up motion by the old oak tree near the property line. A figure crouched low, digging at the base of my fence post. I zoomed in. It was her son, Jake. Mid-20s, wiry hoodie pulled tight. He pulled out a small sign from his backpack and hammered it into the ground. When morning came, I found it. Community property, no trespassing. The audacity almost made me laugh. I yanked it out and tossed it onto the gravel. But when I turned around, a second sign was nailed to my mailbox. They were marking territory as if words on plastic could rewrite deeds. By midweek, the HOA had sent me a cease and desist letter accusing me of falsifying historical records and disturbing the peace. I could practically hear Karen dictating it word for word, her perfume-scented spite dripping off the page. Instead of replying, I uploaded all the footage to a hidden drive and made copies. Then I called a local journalist, Mara Lewis, a friend of a friend who covered property disputes and corruption cases. When I told her what was happening, she asked to see the documents. 2 hours later, she was at my cabin, notebook in hand, camera rolling. "You realize," she said quietly after reading the Branford letters, "this could expose a century-old fraud." "It's the plan," I said. We spent the afternoon recording an interview, her lens capturing every inch of the restored cabin, the old letters laid out like artifacts on the dining table. When she left, she promised to run the story within a week. That same evening, I heard shouting outside. I stepped onto the porch and saw Jake again, this time not sneaking, but raging. He kicked at my fence, yelling for me to come out. "You think you can steal our history, old man?" he shouted. "You're nothing but a thief." I didn't answer. The cameras caught everything. He hurled a rock through one of my lanterns before storming off. I called the sheriff, who took the report, but couldn't find him. The next day, Karen showed up again, this time with a lawyer. They stood at the end of my drive, shouting about illegal surveillance and privacy violations. I calmly pointed to the CCTV in use signs posted along my fence. "Public view," I said. "You're not on private ground until you trespass." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Karen just glared. "You'll regret this," she hissed before turning away. But something unexpected happened that night. While checking footage, I noticed a second figure following Jake the previous evening, someone smaller, wearing a dark coat. The way they moved, fast and cautious, didn't look like one of Karen's HOA lackeys. I slowed the playback and enhanced the frame. It wasn't anyone I recognized. They'd left footprints near the old well behind the cabin. When I went out there the next morning, I found a folded note wedged under a stone. "She lied to you. The land hides more than you think." I stood there, wind cold against my neck, staring at those words. It wasn't Karen's handwriting. The ink was old, faded brown, and the paper smelled faintly of mildew. It looked like it had been there for years, maybe decades. I opened it further and found a faint sketch of the cabin with a small X near the well. My heart pounded. I started digging. After half an hour, my shovel hit something hard metal. I cleared the dirt away and uncovered a rusted lockbox about the size of a toolbox. The hinges were corroded, but inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were several yellowed pages and a photograph. A man standing on this very porch, 19th century clothing, hat in hand. Written on the back, "Elias Branford, 1881. The letters told a darker story. Elias hadn't just fought for this land. He died defending it. The last page was smeared with something dark, maybe ink, maybe blood. It read, "If they take this land, they'll take the hollow with it. Don't trust the branches." I felt a chill crawl up my spine. The Branch family had become the HOA's roots, and Karen Branch, by bloodline, had been continuing a legacy of theft and control that began 150 years ago. That night, I called Mara and told her everything. "I'll need to verify the documents," she said. "But if these are real, this is bigger than property. It's legacy theft." She promised to cross-check county records and follow the genealogy trail. I barely slept, listening to the woods creak and shift outside. Around 3 a.m., my motion alarm went off again, this time from behind the cabin. I opened the monitor feed and froze. Someone was standing in the yard, looking straight at one of my cameras. Not Karen. Not Jake. A man older, tall, pale face, half hidden under a hat. He didn't move, just stared. Then he turned and walked into the trees. When I checked the feed in the morning, the footage was gone. That camera's entire memory had been wiped. My network log showed no external access, no deletion command. It was like it never recorded. I replaced the camera and tried to shake it off as a glitch. But the unease clung to me all day. The woods around Pine Hollow had always felt ancient, but now they felt aware. Every sound, a branch snapping, a crow calling, made my pulse jump. By Friday, the local paper ran Mara's first piece. Historic Pine Hollow feud resurfaces after 150 years. It featured photos of the cabin, the Branford documents, and a short interview with me describing the restoration. The article exploded online. Comments flooded in, some praising me for preserving history, others attacking me for disrespecting heritage. Karen must have seen it within hours, because that evening, she returned again, this time pounding on my door. "You had no right to drag my family name through the mud," she screamed. "You're ruining everything my ancestors built." I opened the door slowly, keeping my phone recording. Maybe they shouldn't have built it on stolen land. Her face went red. "You'll regret this," she said again, voice shaking. "You don't know what you've started." Then she stormed off, tires squealing down the road. I stood in the doorway for a long time after she left, watching the last light fade from the trees. My phone buzzed. A message from Mara. "You were right. The Branford claim is real." And the Branch family forged documents to take control of Pine Hollow in 1883. My stomach twisted. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was generational corruption, an entire community built on stolen ground. And now, I was the one threatening to expose it. That night, I saved every file, every document, every recording to multiple drives. I backed them up off-site. Then I locked my doors, checked my cameras, and sat by the fire with the old photograph of Elias Branford. The flame light flickered over his face, and for the first time, I thought I saw something familiar in his expression, defiance. Maybe that same stubborn streak had found its way to me. I wasn't just restoring his cabin. I was finishing his fight. But somewhere in the distance, deep in the woods, I heard the crack of a branch. Slow, deliberate, human. Then another. I turned off the lights and watched from the window. A faint lantern glow moved between the trees, bobbing closer, then stopping near the well. Whoever was out there wasn't afraid of being seen. I reached for my flashlight, but before I could step outside, the lantern went out. The forest swallowed the light, leaving only silence. By dawn, the fog was thicker than ever, and the air carried that wet electric stillness that comes before a storm. The woods around Pine Hollow looked softer in the haze, almost dreamlike, but I knew better now. I'd seen too much to fall for its quiet charm. The cabin creaked gently as if waking up with me, its timbers shifting like they were stretching after a long nightmare. I brewed a pot of coffee and stared out the window toward the well. The dirt around it was disturbed, fresh footprints in the mud. Boot prints too big to be Karen's. Whoever had been out there last night had come close, dangerously close. I grabbed my camera and followed the prints around the back. They circled the well twice, then veered off toward the tree line where the fog swallowed everything past 10 feet. I crouched, touched the damp earth, and felt that pulse of wrongness, again the same one I'd felt when I found Elias Branford's letters. Something about this land hummed under the surface, like an old machine waiting to start up again. After breakfast, I drove into town to meet Mara. She was already at the diner, tapping away on her laptop. "You're not going to believe what I found," she said before I even sat down. She turned the screen toward me. The Branch family didn't just forge land documents, they manipulated the entire county archive. In 1883, 3 parcels were reclassified as community-owned after a mysterious fire destroyed the courthouse. "Guess which one your cabin sits on?" "Let me guess," I said. "Elias Branford's." She nodded. "There's more." The original Branford claim included mineral rights under the property. Pine Hollow was sitting on iron and limestone deposits. That's why the Branches wanted it. I leaned back, trying to process it all. So this wasn't just about land. It was about profit. Mara nodded again. And legacy. The HOA's authority today comes directly from those old Branch family trusts. If the truth comes out, they lose everything. I stared out the diner window at the quiet Main Street. Then they'll do anything to stop it. When I got back to the cabin, the mail was waiting on the porch. A manila envelope, no return address. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single photo, me standing on the porch last night, looking into the woods. Written across the bottom in black marker were 3 words, "Stop digging, Turner." My heart skipped. Someone had been close enough to photograph me, close enough to leave this without being seen. I checked my cameras again, nothing. No alerts, no motion. Somehow they'd slipped past every lens. I walked the perimeter twice, nerves sharp, but found nothing. Only silence and that ever-present fog. By evening, the sky darkened with heavy clouds, thunder rolling distantly. I sat inside, fire crackling, the Branford letters spread out before me. The handwriting trembled in places, the ink bleeding through the old paper like veins. I read them over and over, trying to understand what Elias meant by the hollow. His last letter mentioned something buried beneath the cabin itself, the foundation of truth, he called it. The words nagged at me. I got up, grabbed my flashlight, and went into the cellar. The air down there was cold and damp, smelling of soil and age. I ran the beam across the stone walls until something caught my eye. A faint carving near the base of one support beam. 3 letters, barely visibly B.W. Branford's initials, but the W was new. I pressed against the beam, and a small section of the wall shifted slightly. A hidden seam. My pulse quickened. I pushed harder, and the panel gave way with a groan, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside was a metal box, similar to the one I'd found near the well, but heavier. I dragged it out, wiped away dust, and pried it open. Inside were old maps, detailed sketches of Pine Hollow and the surrounding valley, annotated in Branford's handwriting. One corner had been burned, but the markings were clear. Tunnels, shafts, old mine entrances. And right beneath where my cabin stood now, a small, X-labeled chamber. I felt a chill crawl up my arms. The Branford estate had been built over something ancient. Maybe that's why the Branches wanted it so badly, because whatever was buried here was worth more than gold. I barely had time to process before headlights swept across my window. A car door slammed, then another. Voices. I killed the lantern and peered outside. Karen and Jake stood by the gate, flashlights cutting through the rain. "We know you're in there," Karen shouted. "You can't hide forever, Turner." Jake's voice followed, angrier, louder. "Come out and face us." My jaw tightened. I turned on the recorder app on my phone and hit the porch light switch. It flickered to life, illuminating them in full. "You're trespassing," I called out. "Leave now, or I'll call the sheriff." "Go ahead," Karen yelled. "He's already seen the documents we gave him. You're under investigation for fraud?" I almost laughed. "Fraud? You mean the letters your ancestors forged?" Her face twisted, and Jake took a step forward. "You think you can ruin us? My grandfather's name is on that land. He built this town." "No," I said evenly. "He stole it. And now the whole world's about to know." Jake charged a few steps closer, rain pouring down his hood. "You don't understand. That cabin, there's something in it that belongs to us." The way he said it sent a cold jolt through me. I stepped back inside and locked the door. When I looked again, they were gone. An hour later, thunder cracked so loud it rattled the windows. I went to check the cameras and froze. The feed showed movement in the cellar. I switched to the interior view. A shadow moved past the frame, quick and low. My heart raced. Someone was inside. I grabbed the crowbar I kept by the stairs and crept down slowly, flashlight trembling in my hand. The cellar was darker than usual, the air thick with the smell of wet earth. I swung the beam across the room. Nothing. I took another step, and the light caught something glinting near the hidden panel I'd opened earlier. A fresh scrape on the stone. Someone had tried to widen the gap. Dirt scattered across the floor, footprints half washed by the dripping ceiling. I scanned the walls again, every nerve alive, but saw only shadows. When I turned to go back upstairs, the flashlight flickered once, twice, then died. The sound that followed, soft, dragging, like something being pulled, made my blood turn cold. I stood frozen, listening. Then silence. I bolted upstairs, locked the door behind me, and waited until the first pale hint of morning crept through the window. When daylight came, the cellar was empty again. No footprints, no scrape marks, like it had all been a bad dream. But when I checked the camera feed, the motion alert from last night was gone erased. Just like before, someone knew how to manipulate the system. Someone who'd done this before. I replaced the batteries, changed the passwords, and sent copies of the files tomorrow with a warning. If anything happens to me, release everything. She replied a few minutes later. Already planned to, that evening. A black SUV I didn't recognize drove by slowly, twice before disappearing into the trees. I took photos of the plates and sent them to Briggs, who promised to check them. The sky broke open in rain again, and thunder rolled through the valley like cannon fire. I sat by the window, watching, waiting. Around midnight, lightning flashed hand for an instant. I saw a figure standing near the well again, unmoving, soaked, staring straight at the cabin. When the next lightning strike came, they were gone. But the next morning I found something new by the porch. A single iron key, old and rusted, wrapped in twine. Attached was a note written in the same old script as the Branford letters. The chamber awaits. My hands shook as I turned the key over in my palm. It was heavy, real, ancient. Part of me wanted to throw it into the woods, but another part, the part that had been obsessed with this cabin since the moment. I saw it and knew I couldn't. Whatever lay beneath this land was calling, just like it had called Elias. I grabbed a flashlight, gloves and rope, and went down to the cellar again. The hidden wall was still open. I found a narrow shaft behind it, just wide enough to crawl through. The air inside was colder than before, thick with the smell of earth and rust. I lowered myself down, the beam of my flashlight catching the faint glint of stone walls descending into darkness. It wasn't just a crawl space. It was a tunnel. The deeper I went, the more the air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. The tunnel sloped down into a small chamber carved from solid rock. Old support beams lined the ceiling, blackened with age. In the center sat a wooden chest, half buried in dirt. My heart pounded as I brushed it off. The key fit perfectly. When I turned it, the lock gave a dull metallic click, and the lid creaked open. Inside were stacks of parchment, a leather-bound journal, and a bundle of coins tarnished with age. I picked up the journal and opened it carefully. It was Elias Branford's handwriting again, but these pages weren't letters. They were confessions. He wrote about the Branch family's betrayal, how they discovered iron veins beneath the hollow and murdered his brother to claim the rights. He wrote about burying the proof here, fearing for his life, vowing that the truth shall rise when the hollow awakens. My hands trembled as I read. The last entry stopped mid-sentence. They're here. If anyone finds this, the line ended there, ink smeared violently across the page. I heard something then faint, echoing through the tunnel. A footstep. I snapped off the flashlight and held my breath. Another step closer. A beam of light flickered on in the distance. Someone else was down here. The light crept closer, flickering off the damp stone until it caught the outline of a figure stepping from the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. He was tall, thin, his face pale as parchment. His clothes, the style of another century wool coat, high collar, boots caked with dust that looked older than the cabin itself. His eyes glowed faintly in the beam of my flashlight, not with the reflection of light, but something colder, deeper. For a moment I couldn't move. The rational part of my mind screamed impossible, but every instinct in me whispered the name I didn't want to say aloud. Elias. The figure tilted his head slightly, as if remembering the sound of the name. The air around us grew heavy, pressing against my chest until it hurt to breathe. He took a slow step forward, boots grinding on stone. The smell of iron and smoke filled the chamber. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind through a hollow beam, dry, distant, but heavy with sorrow. "You should not have opened it," he said. The words seemed to echo from the walls themselves. My hands trembled around the journal. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. He looked at the book in my grip, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, then grief. "The truth was never meant to rest," he murmured. "They buried me with it. You've stirred what they feared most." Lightning cracked above ground, sending a rumble through the tunnel. Dust drifted from the ceiling. I swallowed hard. "I just wanted to fix what they broke," I said. "Karen and her family, they stole your land. I can prove it." The man stepped closer, the dim lantern in his hand lighting the edges of his face. He was unmistakable now. The same features from the photograph I'd found in the box, though his skin was pale as bone, his eyes the color of ash. "Proof," he said softly. "Proof means nothing to the dead." His gaze moved past me toward the tunnel. "They will come for it as they came for me." As the temperature dropped, my breath misted in front of my face. "You mean the branches?" He nodded once, a slow, weary motion. "They made a covenant with this soil. The hollow gave them its strength, and in return they fed it what it demanded. Fed it." His voice lowered. "Blood." The chamber seemed to pulse then, as if the walls themselves were alive. A faint hum rose from the earth, the same vibration I'd felt since buying the cabin. Elias turned toward the chest. "You must finish what was begun. Seal the hollow again, or it will take all that remains." I stepped closer. "How?" He looked back at me, his expression carved from stone. "By truth, by fire." Another thunderclap rolled through the ground. I blinked against the flickering light, and when my eyes opened again, he was gone. The chamber stood empty, the lantern on the floor still burning but casting no shadow. I felt a chill run through me so deep it made my teeth ache. My hands shook as I grabbed the journal and stumbled back toward the tunnel. The way out seemed longer than before, the walls closing in, whispering with voices too low to understand. When I finally crawled out into the cellar, rain was hammering the roof above. The cabin groaned like it was alive, every board shuddering under the storm's fury. I slammed the trapdoor shut and leaned against it, trying to slow my breathing. My mind raced. What had I seen? A ghost? A hallucination? The logical part of me wanted to explain it away. The damp air, exhaustion, adrenaline. But the smell of iron still lingered on my clothes, and the lantern I'd brought up with me burned with the same unnatural light I'd seen below. I set it on the table, and its flame danced blue for a moment before settling into a dull orange. I opened the journal again, flipping to the last page, the one that ended mid-sentence. Under the smeared ink, I could see faint letters bleeding through from the next sheet, a hidden page glued to the back cover. I peeled it carefully apart, revealing words scrawled in haste: to seal the hollow, return the key, and burn the mark. The key. The rusted iron one that had appeared on my porch. I grabbed it and turned it over in my hand. On the back, faintly engraved beneath layers of corrosion, was a symbol, a circle with a cross through it, identical to the carving I'd seen on one of the cabin's beams. Return the key, I murmured. But where? The answer hit me. The well. The place where I'd first found Branford's box, the heart of this cursed land. The storm outside was relentless, but I didn't care. I threw on my coat, stuffed the key and the journal into my bag, and stepped into the rain. The wind howled through the trees, tearing at branches, and lightning strobed across the sky. I reached the well and shone my flashlight down. The water below churned violently, though the wind shouldn't have reached that deep. The air stank of sulfur. My pulse hammered. I tied the key to a rope, lowered it slowly, and whispered, "Whatever this is, end it." The moment the key touched the water, the wind stopped. Dead silence. Then the ground trembled, and the rope went taut. Something had pulled it down. I staggered back, nearly losing my footing. A deep rumble echoed up from the well, low and guttural, like the earth itself was exhaling. Then faintly, from somewhere in that darkness, I heard a voice. "Thank you." The air around the well began to glow faintly, a soft, cold light spiraling upward like mist. I watched, frozen, as the glow spread across the ground in thin veins of pale blue, tracing invisible paths through the soil toward the cabin. The storm had stopped, but thunder rolled again from beneath the ground. I ran back inside, just as every lantern, every bulb, every screen flickered with static. The air smelled of ozone and iron. The Brantford Journal on the table fluttered open to the same, lying again and again by fire. The words pulsed faintly, the ink shimmering like embers. I grabbed the old lantern and stepped toward the fireplace. The flame turned blue again, casting long shadows that stretched up the walls. Then, suddenly pounding on the door, "Open up!" Karen's voice, sharp, desperate. "Turner, I know what you found." I hesitated, heart racing. "You need to listen." She shouted, "You don't understand what that place is." I swung the door open. She stood there, soaked, eyes wild, Jake behind her gripping a shovel like a weapon. "You did it, didn't you?" she hissed. "You opened the chamber. How do you know about that?" I demanded. "Because we've been trying to keep it sealed?" She shouted. "For generations, the Branch family guarded the hollow. You think we wanted the land for greed? It was to contain it." Lightning flashed behind her, illuminating the panic on her face. "You've doomed us all." Before I could respond, the ground shook violently. The floorboards cracked under our feet. A deep roar rose from beneath the house, and a burst of freezing air shot through the open door, knocking us all backward. Karen screamed as a shape of light, human but distorted, faceless, surged up from the ground, swirling through the room. It wasn't Elias anymore. It was something older, something that had been trapped down there for a century, fed by secrets and blood and silence. The figure's voice wasn't a sound so much as a vibration that rattled my bones. Truth must burn. The lantern in my hand flared so bright I had to shield my eyes. Instinct took over. I staggered to the fireplace, yanked the Brantford Journal from my bag, and threw it into the flames. The fire roared to life, leaping high up the chimney. The figure screamed, or maybe the house did, and the light twisted violently before shooting back down through the floor. The tremor stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The rain outside eased to a soft drizzle. I turned slowly. Karen and Jake were gone. The door hung open, swinging gently in the wind. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. The blue flame in the lantern dimmed to normal yellow, then went out completely. I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, staring at the scorched fireplace where the journal had burned. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me until I could barely breathe. The cabin creaked once more, then settled into silence, a deep, peaceful silence that felt final. I don't know how long I sat there before exhaustion dragged me under. When I woke, dawn was filtering through the windows, the storm gone. The air felt lighter, cleaner. I stepped outside. The ground around the well was blackened, as if struck by lightning, but the strange glow was gone. Birds chirped in the trees again. For the first time since buying this place, Pine Hollow felt alive, but not haunted. I looked toward the cul-de-sac where Karen's house stood. Smoke rose from her chimney, normal, human, mundane. Maybe she'd survived. Maybe the Hollow had taken what it wanted and let the rest of us go. I didn't know, and for once, I didn't care. I walked back inside, ran my hand along the old wooden wall, and whispered, "Rest now, eh?" The boards were warm to the touch. Somewhere deep beneath, I could almost feel the hollow breathing slow and steady again. Asleep, but watching. The days after the storm passed quietly, almost too quietly, like the land itself was holding its breath. The air smelled cleaner, lighter, and the oppressive hum I'd grown used to beneath the soil had finally vanished. I tried convincing myself it was over, that burning the journal, turning the key and sealing the hollow had truly set everything right, but something about the silence unnerved me. It wasn't peace. It was waiting. The town gossip moved fast, of course. Within 48 hours, word spread that the outsider who bought the old Branford cabin had caused another blackout. HOA members whispered when I drove by, pretending to trim their hedges while watching me like vultures circling roadkill. But they didn't confront me directly, not after the storm. They were scared. Karen hadn't been seen since that night. Her son Jake had been spotted near the forest once, pale and shaken, muttering something about fire in the ground before disappearing again. I thought about calling the sheriff, but what would I say? "Hey, a ghost told me your land's cursed?" No, I needed real evidence, something that connected the Branford family's past to what the HOA was hiding. That's when I remembered the town archives. The Historical Society in Maple Bend, just 20 minutes away, kept property records dating back to the 1800s. I drove there early the next morning, a rising sun bleeding gold through the fog. Inside, the building smelled of dust and oil lamps. A volunteer named Edna greeted me, an elderly woman with bright, suspicious eyes. "You're the one who bought Pine Hollow," she said, not asking but stating. "That place has got stories." "So I've heard," I replied carefully. "I'm looking for anything on the Branford estate land transfers. Deaths, old legal disputes." Her smile faded. "Branfords. That's a name I haven't heard in a long time." She led me into the back room lined with shelves of brittle folders and faded maps. "Most of the Branford records burned in the courthouse fire of '54, she said, "but some survived. If you're patient, you might find something worth your while." I spent hours digging through the boxes, flipping through deeds, census logs, and old ledgers. Most were routine, boring farm transactions and tax records, but one document caught my attention. It was a notarized letter dated 1876, signed by Elias Branford himself, granting temporary stewardship of the land to the Hollow's guardian family, the Branches. The wording was strange. Stewardship, not ownership. And there was an odd clause: to maintain the seal and preserve the bargain. The steward shall never abandon the soil, nor forsake the bloodline until the debt is paid. I felt a chill creep down my spine. Debt, seal, bloodline. It all connected. The HOA wasn't just protecting property lines, they were protecting a pact made generations ago. I copied the letter and took it to the town clerk to trace the family tree. The clerk, a young man who looked half asleep, typed the name Branch into the system and frowned. "That's weird," he muttered. "They changed their name in 1911. Used to be Branford Branch. Guess they dropped the Branford part." "To hide the connection," I said under my breath, "huh?" Nothing. Driving back toward Pine Hollow, the sky began to darken again, with storm clouds, but with smoke. A fire truck passed me on the opposite lane, sirens blaring. My stomach dropped when I saw where they were headed, the cul-de-sac. I floored it. By the time I reached Karen's house, the roof was half gone, black smoke billowing out. Neighbors huddled across the street, whispering in shock. One of them spotted me and pointed. "That's him." He cursed her. I ignored it and ran up to a firefighter. "Anyone inside?" He shook his head. "No sign of residents. Found 2 sets of footprints leading toward the woods. No one's come back." My eyes followed the trail of scorched grass leading toward the tree line. The same woods that bordered my cabin? The same path that led to the hollow? That night, sleep was impossible. The forest glowed faintly in the distance, not from flame, but from something beneath the earth-pale light, just like before. I took my lantern and journal copies and followed the trail. The woods were silent, except for the crunch of leaves underfoot. Half a mile in, I found remnants of a campfire and something else. A wooden box, half buried in ash. Inside were photographs, charred around the edges, Karin, Jake, and others, all standing before my cabin, holding hands in a circle. In the background, carved into a tree trunk, was that same circle with cross symbol. I flipped through the pictures faster, my heartbeat rising. The last one froze me, a black and white photo dated 1912 showing the same ceremony, same spot, same symbol only. The people were older generations of the same families. The HOA wasn't new. It was the covenant itself, disguised through time. As I examined the photo, something crinkled inside the box of folded note. The handwriting was shaky, but familiar. Karen's, if you found this, it means the fire failed. The hollow doesn't forgive. It only trades. The words blurred as rain began to fall again. Trades what? I whispered, scanning the woods. Then, from somewhere deep in the trees, I heard a faint humming, low rhythmic, like a chant carried on the wind. I moved toward it slowly, the beam of my flashlight catching movement between the trees. Shadows flickered in the mist, forming shapes that shouldn't have been human. Then I saw them. Half a dozen figures standing in a circle, their faces hidden by hoods, each holding an old lantern. At the center of the circle was Jake, kneeling, trembling, his hands bound. "Please!" he cried. I didn't mean to. One of the figures raised a hand and the chant grew louder. My instincts screamed to run, but something inside me, the same force that had drawn me to this land in the first place, kept me rooted. The leader turned, lowering their hood, and my stomach lurched. It was Edna, the old archivist from the records office. Her eyes glowed faintly in the lantern light. "You should have stayed away," she said calmly. "You weren't chosen. Chosen for what?" I demanded. "To pay the debt," she said. "The hollow takes one guardian every century. Elias tried to break it and failed. You opened it. Now it's bound to you." My throat went dry. I sealed it. "You postponed it," she corrected. "The seal must always have a keeper." Jake screamed as the light from the lanterns pulsed brighter, threads of energy snaking toward him. I lunged forward, grabbing the closest lantern and smashing it against the ground. The light shattered, scattering like fireflies. The chant faltered. I dragged Jake up and ran, branches whipping at my face. Behind us, the woods roared with unnatural wind. The earth shook again, but I didn't stop until we burst into the clearing near the cabin. Jake collapsed, gasping for air. "They said it was for my mother," he wheezed. "They said if we finished the ritual, she'd come back." My heart pounded. "You think that thing brings anyone back?" He shook his head violently. "It's not her. It's never her." Then his eyes widened. "It's you. It shows you." I froze. "What?" "The hollow doesn't forget who opens it," he whispered. "You're the debt now." I didn't have time to process it before the ground beneath us split with a thunderous crack. Light burst from the fissure, white-hot and blinding. I grabbed Jake's arm and pulled him toward the cabin, slamming the door behind us. The floorboards glowed faintly beneath our feet, the same veins of light I'd seen that night. The Branford key, the journal, the symbols, they weren't artifacts. They were anchors. The fire hadn't destroyed the curse. It had only moved it into me, into this place. The walls groaned as whispers filled the air again, soft but urgent. "Keeper, keeper." Jake backed into the corner, shaking. "What do we do?" I looked toward the fireplace, the charred remains of the journal, still faintly warm. "We find the truth," I said quietly. "If this curse is built on lies, then we dig until we hit the bones." I walked to the cellar door and pulled it open. Cold air wafted up, carrying the smell of wet earth and iron. "You're not going down there again," Jake pleaded. "We have to," I said. "It's the only way to end it." He hesitated, then grabbed a flashlight and followed. The staircase groaned under our weight as we descended into the dark once more. At the bottom, the chamber looked different, cleaner. Somehow the carvings on the walls glowing faintly. In the center stood the old chest I'd seen before, now sealed shut again. But something new had been carved into the lid, the same circle symbol, only now it pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. I reached out, but the moment my fingers brushed it, a surge of visions hit me like a wave. I saw flashes of Elias sealing the hollow, of the Branch family watching, of fire spreading across the valley. Then one final image. A ledger, hidden inside a stone wall, marked with the Branford seal. I gasped and stumbled back, my heart racing. "It's real," I said. "There's proof. The covenant wasn't made with gods or spirits. It was a deal between men. A lie that turned into a curse." Jake looked at me, eyes wide. "Then let's find that ledger." I nodded. Tomorrow. I climbed the stairs, exhausted but certain for the first time that there was a path forward. The hollow wasn't invincible. It was history repeating itself, waiting for someone to finally break the cycle. But as I reached the top step, a soft whisper brushed my ear. "Truth burns." The first light of morning barely touched the treetops when I stepped out of the cabin, fuffled in one hand, flashlight in the other. The air was cold enough to sting my lungs, and the ground steamed where yesterday's rain still clung to the soil. Jake followed behind, silent but determined, his eyes shadowed by exhaustion. Neither of us had slept. The whispers from the cellar had stopped sometime before dawn, leaving behind a hollow quiet that felt almost suspicious. I could still hear that last echo in my head, "Truth burns." Maybe Elias hadn't been warning me about fire at all. Maybe he meant that the truth itself had to be destroyed before it destroyed everything else. We started behind the cabin, where the stone foundation met the hillside. The vision I'd seen in the hollow kept replaying in my mind, the hidden ledger sealed inside a wall. The same ledger that started this curse disguised as stewardship. The air smelled faintly of ash and damp leaves. "You're sure it was here?" Jake asked. "Not sure," I said, "but Elias showed me this spot for a reason." We knelt by the oldest section of the wall, where the mortar had eroded into powder. As I pried out a loose stone, the cold breath of the earth sighed through the opening. I shone the flashlight inside. Something glinted faintly in the dark. My pulse kicked. "Help me." Together, we pulled away stones until a small cavity emerged, no bigger than a crate. Inside sat a metal box wrapped in oilcloth, untouched by time. The hinges creaked when I opened it, revealing a stack of leather-bound books and a single brass plate engraved with the Branford seal. The books weren't ledgers exactly. They were minutes from meetings, letters, and contracts written in spidery ink. The first page I opened read, June 4th, 1873. Agreement between the Branford estate and Branch family. In exchange for concealment of the well incident. My stomach tightened. Beneath the elegant handwriting was a list of signatures: Elias Branford, Thomas Branch, and 3 witnesses. The following entry explained everything. The curse wasn't born of superstition. It was a cover-up. A Branford laborer had died when a new well collapsed, trapping him inside. To avoid scandal, Elias and Thomas sealed the shaft and paid off the families with land and silence. Over time, guilt turned into legend, and legend into ritual. The Branches kept watch, binding their heirs to guard the hollow, while the Branfords fled west. The story changed hands, twisted by fear, until it became the covenant the HOA still worshipped. I looked up at Jake, who stared at the pages as if reading his own death sentence. "They killed him," he whispered. "And then they made us keep his grave secret." Flipped further. The later pages described the fire of 1879, the same one that supposedly destroyed the estate. But the ledger told a different story. The fire hadn't been an accident. It was an attempt to erase the past. By fire, Elias had written in the margin the same phrase that haunted his journal. Only he'd meant it literally burning the evidence of his crime, not sealing a supernatural gate. Except something must have gone wrong. The men who died in that fire were the same ones who signed the agreement. The hollow wasn't cursed. It was haunted by their guilt. I felt the ground hum faintly beneath my knees, a slow heartbeat pulsing through the soil. Jake backed away. "It knows we found it." The truth had weight. It pressed down on me as I sat at the old cabin table. The ledger spread open in front of me, its pages trembling with the draft that slipped through the cracks of the walls. Outside, dawn had bled into a gray, hollow morning. The mist hung low over the trees, swallowing sound, swallowing thought. Jake sat opposite me, his face pale and drawn, eyes fixed on the brass plate that bore the Branford seal. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The curse wasn't a curse. It was history, the kind no one wanted to remember, the kind that stains a place forever. "So what do we do?" Jake finally asked, voice shaking. "We end it," I said. "For real this time. No lies, no rituals. Just truth." But as I said it, I could feel the hollow stirring beneath my feet. The faint throb of energy that had become as familiar as a heartbeat. It didn't want to be ended. It wanted to survive, to feed on memory and guilt the way it always had. I spent hours transcribing the ledger's contents, documenting every signature, every lie. When I finished, I placed the copies in a waterproof case and sealed it tight. "We take this to the town archive," I said. "Let the truth see light." Jake hesitated. "What about the hollow?" "The hollow feeds on secrecy," I said. "Once the truth is public, it dies. At least that's what I wanted to believe." We packed the ledger and stepped outside. The air was unnaturally still. Even the birds had gone quiet. A chill crawled up my spine. The forest seemed to be holding its breath again. We hadn't made it 10 steps from the porch before the earth shuddered. The old well groaned and split, coughing up a plume of cold mist that rolled toward us like smoke. Jake stumbled back. "It's not letting us go," he said. "It knows we're ending it." The mist thickened, taking shape vague outlines of men. Faces blurred, but eyes hollow, like the dead trying to remember what it felt like to be alive. I recognized one of them immediately. Elias Branford. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I didn't see menace or anger. I saw regret. He stepped forward, voice carried on the wind like dry leaves. "The debt must be paid." My throat tightened. "I know," I said quietly, "but it's time it ends." The air trembled with his reply. "One must stay. One must carry it." Jake's hand clamped on my shoulder. "No," he whispered. "He means you." I looked around us, the mist, the faces, the woods, all watching. The realization settled in my gut like ice. The hollow couldn't simply be erased. It had to be held, contained, remembered by someone bound to it. Elias had done it before. Now it wanted me.